Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me on another podcast. This is my third one. It's been a lot of fun doing these. It just gives me a chance to sit down and talk about issues of the day that people are dealing with. And the one I have today is definitely applicable to modern society with our COVID-19 thing and coronavirus. Boy, is it ever. One of the things that people are dealing with is as this fear of the virus has just gripped the country, gripped people everywhere, and everyone's panicking. States and cities, the government is just shutting everything down, forcing people to stay in their homes. It's like lockdown. It's really become like martial law because the cops can basically checkpoint you, and if you're not supposed to be out, send you home or arrest you, give you a fine, put you in jail, a whole bunch of consequences. So there's a lot of debate over whether or not that's constitutional and things like that. Of course, there's a lot of people screaming at the top of their lungs that people just need to stay home and comply so we can stymie the virus. And I'm not going to get into what's going to help stop the virus. That is not the point of this podcast. The point of this podcast is really to discuss utilitarianism versus principles. And if you guys know in ethics, there is a huge discussion over whether or not what is morally right is utilitarian, which means the ends justify the means. Whereas if the classic idea of principles means that the means justify the ends. So there's this debate on which one is it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and argue that up and down. What I will say is that I'm going to agree that in ethics, there is a goal, number one, and the goal is a certain vision of reality. It is the best condition and it is the best result for all parties involved according to their values. Now, granted, values will change from person to person, and that makes it very tough to discuss morality with people if what they value is different. I personally have drawn up something similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where basically I presume that nobody's right to happiness trumps somebody's right to life. It just doesn't. Nobody's right to not be offended trumps somebody's right to be unhealthy, right? So life comes before health, which comes before liberty, which comes before actualization, like of your dreams and what makes you happy. So most people would agree with that. Most ethicists and people that study would agree with that idea that you have to draw a line if people are equal, and that's important. If all people are equal, then you have to draw this line. And that was discussed in my last podcast, an eye for an eye. Then you have to draw this line that this is what's ethical. And my minor needs do not trump or are not more important than your major needs. That being said, there are a lot of people very, very willing to make sacrifices on liberties and things like that, and for the sake of the good of the whole. So it's very easy to say everyone should be shut up and people should be microchipped and people should be put in their homes and monitored by the government in order to save. You hear this a lot. Just one life is important. I've heard that before. I think it was the New York Governor Cuomo said even one life is worth it. So, everybody's liberty. One life is worth everyone's liberty. The idea is that, yeah, that can make sense. But why is it that strikes a wrong chord with us? Where is it that ideology, that sort of structure breaks down? Well, where it breaks down is in the importance of principle. So let me tell you a story. When I was working I was working at a company in the past, and we had a group of employees at another store who decided that in order to raise their customer service scores, they would cheat. What they learned was that if they handled transactions through a different method than what was normal, then they wouldn't get a survey. So if there was an angry customer, they would just run them through this method. If they were a happy customer, they run them through the traditional method, and what that would do is keep their angry customers from getting surveys, and so their customer service scores would go up, theoretically. What happened was the opposite. Their customer service scores went down. And they continued to double down on this until everything got worse and worse and worse, and then eventually the store had to be changed over. Now, when we look back on that and wonder why that happened, the reason it happened was because they sacrificed principle for utilitarianism. In a utilitarian mindset, the ends justify the means, meaning that it doesn't matter how you get there. As long as you get there, that's appropriate. That was ethical. But it wasn't ethical, and it did not produce the best result for everyone in the store and for the customers. Principle has an important function. Basically, principle trains people to do what is essential for the good of the whole. That's the whole point of law. That's the whole point of legal discipline, of social code and things like that. Is without that, people's morality breaks down, and what you justify ends up destroying the whole, because more people are involved than just one person. So in the end, it is utilitarian. Principle is very, very important to utilitarianism, because without principle, a utilitarian ethic, it begins to fall apart. You can't do what's good for the whole, what's good for the most people, if you don't abide by principle. There's a breaking point in there, but principle is extremely important. So when we look at, should we maintain principle? It's like the idea of you should not kill, right? So the law, you should not kill, isn't necessarily always the right law to follow. I mean, obviously, if somebody was about to kill innocent people, and the only way that I could stop them was to shoot them and I might kill them, well then, yeah, I mean, life for a life. I made a decision in order to preserve somebody. But the principle is important to society. Now, by no means am I saying that I don't believe in justified war and justified conflict, armed conflict. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that principle is far more important than we give it credit for. And without principle, society breaks down. Principle is part of the social code, the social conduct that helps society function. We need that. So when we look at nowadays this discussion of whether or not we care about the Constitution and all that, I mean, I do remember there are politicians that people that say, is it constitutional to lock people in their houses and monitor them and track them through the government and restrict their every movement and force them to get vaccinated, and there's a huge discussion on whether or not it's ethical to do that. A lot of people are just like, yes, it's extremely ethical because it's for the greater good. Well, what I want to throw into question is, and I'm not saying that it necessarily isn't a bad thing to do some of those things, all right, or unethical to do some of those things. What I am going to say is we need to be careful about what principles we sacrifice, because if we sacrifice all of our principles for a utilitarian good, we're not actually maintaining utilitarian ethic. We're actually allowing ourselves to be distracted by a false goal that is not the real goal. If we're going to be wise and intelligent, we are going to keep into perspective all pieces of that ethic, all pieces, including the principle. All right? Every grade school teacher knows that if the class doesn't follow rules and that one kid breaks the rules, then everyone else is going to break the rules, and the whole thing's going to fall apart. All right? Principles have an important meaning. Anyway, that's mainly what I wanted to discuss with you guys. Let me know your thoughts and what you think about that. I know that it can be kind of a tough decision. Everyone is very, very concerned. This is the thing about fear, and I could do a whole podcast on fear, and I need to. Fear drives people to do really unusual things. It's a very powerful, so does love, but it's a powerful motivating force. And people don't think about consequences when they're afraid. They just don't. It's a flight response. And so they don't think about what's the consequence of allowing these principles to go away. What's this going to mean for the future? What's this mean for a current way of life? They don't think about that. All they think about is everyone's got to be safe. I got to be safe. Protect me, and that's what they think about. So, but let me know what you think, because obviously I still believe that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that structure, like someone else's life is more important than my liberty. I get it. Like there's important things there, but it's just, look, we got to look at the whole broader picture. Let me know what you guys think, and I do appreciate your time and for you listening to me.